The first hint of trouble came with the sky. One moment it was pale and hazy over the endless Texas fields, the next, it was bruised purple, as if someone had smudged ink across the horizon. Simone Carter gripped the steering wheel of her SUV, her stomach sinking. She'd been driving since early morning, heading west for her next equine, nutrition contract, and the last thing she needed was a storm. Her phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Tornado warning, take shelter immediately. Her heart hammered. There was no time to think. The wind picked up fast, turning the grass into a living ocean. She spotted a hand-painted sign for Briggs Ranch and turned onto the dirt road, her tires fishtailing on wet clay. Just as she neared the ranch house, a tall man in a cowboy hat waved her toward a squat metal door built into the side of a berm. "Storm shelter," he shouted over the rising roar. Simone barely had time to grab her purse before he ushered her inside. The door slammed shut behind them with a heavy clang, plunging them into darkness broken only by the faint glow of a battery lantern. The shelter smelled of earth and clean hay, and in the close space she could hear the man's steady breathing. He was tall, his broad shoulders almost brushed the low ceiling, and when he turned the lantern toward her, she caught the sharp lines of his jaw and the shadow of stubble that only made him look more rugged. "You okay?" His voice was deep, warm, carrying the calm of someone used to dangerous situations. Simone nodded, though her pulse was racing. I think so. Thank you for letting me in." "Wouldn't leave anyone out there in this mess," he said simply. The wind howled above, a freight train sound that made Simone's skin prickle. Without realizing it, she wrapped her arms around herself. He noticed. "Here." He shrugged out of his denim jacket and held it out. "You're shaking." She hesitated, then slipped it on. The scent of leather and soap surrounding her. It was still warm from his body. She sank onto the bench along the wall, tucking her legs up as the storm raged. Minutes stretched. The shelter rattled, a deep groan of metal against wind. She pressed her palms to her knees, willing her heartbeat to slow. "You're not from around here," he said after a while, sitting across from her. His hat rested on his thigh, revealing dark blonde hair damp with rain. "No, just passing through. I consult for horse owners. Nutrition programs, feed plans." He nodded slowly. "Explains the trailer. I figured you were hauling stock." Another boom of wind shook the shelter and Simone startled, a small sound escaping her throat before she could stop it. He moved instinctively, crossing the space and crouching beside her. "Hey, you're safe. Nothing's getting through this door." She met his eyes in the glow of the lantern. They were startlingly blue, steady as a calm lake. Her fear loosened a little under his gaze. "I hate storms," she admitted quietly. "Always have." "Most folks do," he said. His hand hovered near hers, not quite touching. "Breathe with me." It was such a simple request, but she obeyed, matching his slow inhale, his exhale. The storm still raged, but it felt farther away. And maybe it was the adrenaline, or the way the shelter felt like its own little world. But when his fingers finally brushed hers, she didn't pull away. Instead, she let him take her hand. His palm was calloused, warm, grounding her in a way nothing else could. "You're doing just fine," he murmured. The air between them shifted, thickened. Simone became acutely aware of how close he was, how the lantern light threw shadows across the strong line of his cheekbone. Her breath hitched when his thumb brushed over the back of her hand. "If it gets too much, just look at me," he said softly. She did. And suddenly the storm wasn't the loudest thing anymore. Her pulse was. His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth, then back up, and the tension between them hummed like a live wire. The next gust of wind hit hard, making the shelter shudder. Simone flinched, and without thinking, he gathered her against him. She felt the solid wall of his chest, the way his heart beat slow and steady under her ear. "You're safe," he said again, this time lower, almost into her hair. They stayed like that, the world shrinking to the sound of their breathing. Slowly, she relaxed against him, her cheek brushing his shirt, and when she tilted her face up, he was already watching her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he bent his head, giving her time to turn away. She didn't. His lips met hers lightly, a question more than a kiss, and when she answered by leaning in, the kiss deepened. Unhurried, warm, the kind that stole the air from her lungs and replaced it with something sweeter. When they finally drew apart, the storm was still raging. Neither spoke, there was nothing to say. The air still hummed between them, charged with something fragile and new. The storm pounded above them, a living thing snarling through the night, but inside the shelter the world had narrowed to the small circle of space they shared. Their first kiss lingered between them like a struck match, fragile but burning hot. Simone's breath came fast, not just from fear. Colton's hand remained against her cheek, his thumb brushing once more over her skin. He looked at her as if asking for permission without words. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, and that was all it took. He kissed her again, slow this time, almost reverent. His lips tasted of rain and grit, of someone who had just pulled her out of the teeth of a storm. When his hand slid to the back of her neck, she let herself lean into him, feeling his solid warmth beneath her palms. The world outside howled, but their movements were hesitant, tender. Colton's fingers skimmed along her arm, down her side, every touch careful, as though he was memorizing her, learning what made her shiver. She explored him too, tracing the hard planes of his chest through his damp shirt, the stubble on his jaw. When he laid her gently back against the blanket-covered floor, it felt less like surrender and more like being found. Their first joining was slow, full of wonder. He watched her face the entire time, making sure she was with him, and she held. His gaze letting him see everything she was feeling. Fear, longing, relief. When it was over, Simone rested against his chest, both of them breathing in sync, the storm beginning to ebb. For a moment there was quiet, only the distant rumble of thunder. Then Colton's hand threaded into her hair, and she felt the tension still thrumming through him. When he kissed her again, there was nothing tentative about it. This time was different, more urgent, more knowing. They had learned each other's edges, and now they pressed closer, seeking more, giving more. There was heat in every touch, every gasp, every way he whispered her name like a vow. When it was over, Simone curled against his chest, both breathing hard, the storm outside finally fading into silence. It felt like the world had given them a moment of peace just for themselves. Sleep came in fragments, and when she woke hours later, the shelter was filled with soft daylight seeping through the cracks above. Colton was gone. Only the faint warmth where he had been lying remained. Simone sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. Her heart felt oddly hollow, not with regret, but with something sharper, a sense of having been seen and then left behind. When she finally pushed open the heavy sheltered door, the sky was an endless, brilliant blue, as though the night had never happened at all. She stood for a long moment, letting the quiet wash over her. Somewhere out there was the man who had made the storm bearable, and she didn't even know his name. But she knew one thing with a strange, unshakable certainty. Her life had just changed, even if she didn't yet know how. The road stretched out before her, washed clean by the storm, but Simone's thoughts were tangled and restless. She couldn't shake the memory of the man's arms around her, the way his voice had made the storm seem small. 3 weeks later, she was leaning over a rest stop sink, knuckles white as she braced against the counter. Her stomach had turned on her for the third morning in a row. Dread pooled in her gut as she pulled a test from a crinkled pharmacy bag and locked herself in a stall. Simone sat in the tiny bathroom of a roadside motel, staring at the small plastic stick in her hand. 2 pink lines, clear as day. Her throat tightened, and she pressed a palm to her belly as though she might already feel life stirring there. Her first reaction was shock. Her second was an unexpected fierce sense of protectiveness. This baby was hers, theirs. The cowboy from the storm had vanished without a trace but his memory, and now this little spark of life was a part of her. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the sound of the motel air conditioner humming in the background. She didn't know his name, didn't know if she'd ever see him again. A lump formed in her throat at the thought. It wasn't just about telling him, it was the ache she felt thinking of those strong arms that had held her when the world felt like it was ending. But life moved forward. Simone had a job offer waiting, an equine nutrition contract for a struggling ranch that needed someone to revamp their entire feeding program. It would give her purpose, income, and time to figure out what came next. "Okay, baby," she whispered, hand still over her stomach. "It's just you and me for now. We'll figure this out." Her reflection in the bathroom mirror showed a woman determined not to crumble. She was going to stand on her own 2 feet, storm or no storm. The Briggs Ranch spread out like a sea of gold and green under the hot Texas sun. Simone stepped out of her truck, tugging her hat low against the glare, and inhaled deeply. The scent of hay and horses grounded her, as it always did. This was what she was good at, fixing what was broken, making things better. She was halfway across the yard toward the barn when the sound of boots on dirt made her pause. A figure stepped out from the shadows of the barn, the tall frame, the Stetson, the broad shoulders, her breath caught. It was him. For a moment, neither of them moved. His jaw worked, like he was grinding down words before speaking. When he finally did, his voice was exactly as she remembered, deep, steady, impossible to ignore. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again." Her pulse thundered. "Neither did I." He took off his hat, running a hand through his dark hair before meeting her gaze again. "Name's Colton Briggs," he said slowly. "This is my family's ranch." Simone's throat felt tight. Of all the ranches in all of Texas, she had walked onto his. Fate, or maybe just the cruel sense of humor of the universe. She squared her shoulders. "Well, Colton Briggs," she said, keeping her tone even, "I guess we've got work to do." His mouth curved, just slightly, into something halfway between a grimace and a smile. "Yeah," he said softly, "we sure do." The barn smelled of sweet hay and leather, the kind of place Simone usually found peace. Today, however, her pulse was a restless drumbeat as she unpacked her feed charts and notebooks. Colton leaned against a nearby post, his hat back on his head, arms crossed over his chest. He watched her like a man trying to solve a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to finish. "You really know horses," he said finally, voice slow and measured. "That's why you hired me." She kept her focus on the feed plan she was pinning to the wall, refusing to meet his gaze. If she did, she'd get lost in it all over again. "That's not the only reason I wanted to talk to you." His boots scuffed against the barn floor as he came closer. She could feel the weight of his presence behind her, just like in the storm shelter. "You disappeared after that night." She froze, her fingers tight on the clipboard. "You disappeared first." A long pause, then a rough exhale. "You're right." She turned then, unable to keep the words inside any longer. "I didn't even know your name, Colton. I woke up to an empty shelter and thought maybe I'd imagined the whole thing." He looked stricken, as though the image of her waking up alone was something he hadn't let himself think about. "I had to get back to the ranch," he said quietly. "My family, there was trouble that night. I didn't mean to leave you wondering." Simone hugged the clipboard to her chest like a shield. "Well, now you know where I ended up." Colton's gaze swept over her, something unreadable flickering in his expression. "Yeah," he said finally. "Now I know." The air between them felt charged, heavy with everything unsaid. Simone turned back to her charts before she did something foolish, like lean into him again. The next morning, the sky was as clear as glass, the kind of day that made everything seem too sharp, too exposed. Simone found Colton in the paddock, tightening the girth on a restless bay gelding. He glanced up, his eyes narrowing at her determined expression. "We need to talk," she said. He tied off the cinch, then straightened to his full height, wiping his hands on a rag. "Figured we might." Simone's throat went dry, but she forced the words out. "Colton, I'm pregnant." The world seemed to go still. Even the horse stopped shifting as if sensing the tension between them. Colton stared at her, his jaw clenching, his breath coming out slow. "You're sure?" His voice was hoarse. "I've taken 3 tests. She lifted her chin. "I'm not asking for anything from you. I just thought you deserved to know." Colton's expression softened, though his eyes burned with a mix of emotions she couldn't name. He stepped closer, closing the space between them. "You think I'd walk away from this? From you?" She blinked at the intensity in his voice. "I don't know what to think. I barely know you." "Well, that's gonna change," he said, his voice firm. "You and that baby ain't going through this alone." The words hit her like another gust of storm wind, knocking the air out of her. Part of her wanted to trust him, to let herself lean into that steady strength again. The other part reminded her of how quickly a man could vanish. "We'll see," she said quietly. Colton nodded slowly, as if accepting the challenge. "Yeah," he said, "we will." By the end of Simone's first week on the ranch, she could feel the eyes on her everywhere she went. Ranch hands paused mid-conversation when she passed. The housekeeper gave her polite but frosty smiles. Even at the diner in town, she overheard her name once or twice, followed by murmured speculation. One evening, as she was finishing her notes in the tack room, Colton appeared in the doorway. His hat shadowed his face, but she could see the tension in his jaw. "Word spreading," he said. "About you. About the baby." Simone set her pencil down, heart thudding. "Let me guess. People are saying I trapped you?" His silence was answer enough. She swallowed hard. "I knew it wouldn't take long. Small towns never let a secret stay quiet." Colton stepped inside, crouching so he was eye level with her where she sat on the hay bale. "Listen to me. I don't care what they say. I know who you are." Her throat ached. "Do you?" His gaze held hers, unwavering. "You're the woman who faced down a tornado with me. The woman who didn't run when life got hard. That's who you are." The sincerity in his voice nearly undid her, but when she glanced past him, she caught sight of a figure standing outside the tack room window, the silhouette of an older man watching them with disapproval written in every line of his stance. "Who's that?" she whispered. Colton's jaw tightened. "My father." And just like that, Simone understood. The storm inside the Briggs family was only just beginning. Simone found herself summoned to the ranch house the next morning, her heart pounding as she walked up the steps. The Briggs home was sprawling, elegant in a way that felt more like a statement than a welcome. Inside, the air smelled faintly of furniture polish and something colder. Judgment, perhaps. Colton was waiting by the fireplace, tense and watchful, but it was the man standing near the window who drew Simone's focus. His silver hair was neatly combed, his starched shirt immaculate, his expression sharp enough to cut glass. "Miss Carter," the man said, his tone cool. "I'm Samuel Briggs. I believe we need to talk." Colton's jaw flexed. "Dad." Samuel held up a hand, silencing him. "We appreciate the work you're doing here, but I must ask if your situation will be a distraction to my son and this ranch." Simone's spine straightened. "My situation?" Samuel's eyes narrowed. "I think you know what I mean. This community is small. People talk. If my son is going to be linked to you, it will reflect on this family and on my re-election campaign." Anger sparked in Simone's chest, hot and immediate. "With respect, Mr. Briggs, I'm not here to ruin your image. I'm here to do my job and take care of our baby." Samuel's gaze flickered to Colton, cold and measuring. "Your baby, you mean?" Colton stepped forward then, shoulders squared. "No, our baby. And you'd better get used to the idea." The silence that followed was deafening. Samuel's face gave nothing away, but Simone felt the tension coiling tighter around them all. "This discussion isn't over," Samuel said finally, before turning on his heel and leaving the room. Simone exhaled shakily. Colton crossed the space between them and caught her hand, his grip warm and steady. "I'm not letting him scare you off," he said. "Not this time." But as she looked into his eyes, Simone couldn't shake the sense that this was only the beginning of the fight. By the end of the week, the gossip had grown legs. At the diner, Simone overheard a pair of women whispering that she had chased Colton down on purpose. At the feed store, someone suggested loudly that she'd been seen in Dallas with another man just months ago. None of it was true, but the damage was done. The stares, the whispered laughter, the sideways glances, it all pressed on her like the weight of the storm shelter door. She was in the feed room when Colton found her, shoulders tight, hands clenched around a bucket. "It's getting bad," he said. "I can hear it when I'm in town. They're trying to make you out to be something you're not." Simone swallowed, blinking back angry tears. "Who do you think is feeding them this trash?" Colton's expression was grim. "My father's campaign manager, most likely. If they can make you look unreliable, they think I'll distance myself." Simone laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And will you?" He set the bucket aside and tipped her chin up until she met his gaze. "No, I won't." For a moment, the air shifted. The world narrowed to just the two of them, the warmth of his hand, the fierce honesty in his voice. Simone's heart thudded painfully, a mix of relief and fear. "Then you'd better be ready," she whispered, "because they're not going to stop." Saturday brought the town's monthly farmers market, and Simone debated skipping it entirely. But Colton insisted she come, saying it would be worse to hide. So she went, wearing her favorite sundress, her head held high even though her stomach was knotted. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. A group of older men at the produce stall gave her pointed looks. One of them muttered something crude under his breath. Before she could react, Colton was there, his broad frame blocking her from view. "You got something to say?" he asked. His voice calm but edged with steel. The man looked startled, then tried to play it off. "Just talkin', Briggs. No harm meant." "You spread another word about her," Colton said, "and we'll have a problem." The market went quiet. People stared. Simone's pulse hammered, but at the same time, something inside her eased. For the first time since she'd told him about the baby, she felt like they were standing on the same side of the storm. When they left the market, Colton took her hand openly, in front of everyone. It was a small thing, but in a town like this, it might as well have been a declaration. "Feel better?" he asked, as they reached his truck. She looked up at him, her chest aching with a strange mixture of gratitude and fear. "No," she admitted softly, "but I feel less alone." The first sign that something was wrong came on Monday morning. Simone found 2 of the feed bins open, supplements spilled across the floor, and 3 horses looking uneasy in their stalls. It looked intentional. Her stomach dropped. She was kneeling to clean up the mess when Colton appeared, his brows drawn tight. "What happened?" "Someone's trying to make me look incompetent," Simone said, her voice sharp with anger. "If those horses had eaten this mix, they could have colicked." Colton swore under his breath, crouching to help. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Simone swallowed hard, fear and fury warring inside her. "This isn't just gossip anymore. They're trying to push me out for real." Colton looked at her, his eyes dark. "Then we push back. I'll put cameras in here tonight. We'll catch whoever it is." For the rest of the day, Simone worked with a knot in her stomach, hyper-aware of every creak of the barn door. The ranch felt less like a refuge and more like a trap. That night, Colton came to the small apartment over the barn where Simone was staying. His face was shadowed by the porch light, his expression stormy. "I can't stand watching them come after you," he said, stepping inside. "I keep thinking about that shelter, about how I held you in the dark while the wind screamed. And I promised myself I wouldn't let anything hurt you." Simone's chest ached. "You can't fight your whole family for me." He closed the distance between them, his hand cupping her face. "Watch me." The words unlocked something inside her. She hadn't realized until now how close to breaking she'd been. Her breath came shakily as tears pricked her eyes. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to fight them and carry this baby and keep my head up all at once." Colton wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against him. "You don't have to do it alone," he said against her hair. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in weeks, Simone let herself cry. She let the weight of it go. Every whisper, every glare, every fear she'd held inside. and Colton stayed, solid and warm, until the storm inside her passed. Morning came softly, the light filtering in through the curtains. Simone was making coffee when Colton appeared, hat in hand, as though he'd been standing outside for an hour just to get himself under control. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, though her throat was tight. "Better than I was." He stepped closer, hesitated, then took the mug from her hand and set it aside. "I've been thinking about that night in the shelter," he said quietly, "about how I held you and felt like the world could fall apart, and I'd still be okay as long as you were in my arms." Simone's heart stuttered. "Colton." Before she could finish, his mouth was on hers. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hungry. It was steady, sure, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise instead of a question. Simone melted against him, the world outside falling away just as it had in the shelter that night. When they finally parted, Colton rested his forehead against hers. "This isn't just about doing the right thing," he said. "I want you. I want this baby, and I don't care what anyone says about it." Tears burned behind Simone's eyes, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from hope, real, living, terrifying hope. "Then let's fight for it," she whispered. He smiled, just a little, and kissed her again. The town's annual fall fair should have been a welcome distraction, but Simone felt the stares the moment she stepped onto the fairgrounds. Colton had insisted she come with him, his hand resting gently at her back as they walked past rows of livestock pens and pie contests. Halfway through the midway, she heard it, her name, spoken just loud enough to carry, followed by giggles. Two women by the kettle corn stand didn't even bother to look away when Simone's eyes met theirs. "Guess we know why she took that job," one of them said to the other. "Bagging a Briggs baby must pay better than horse feed." Simone's chest went tight, but before she could react, Colton turned sharply. "You got something to say?" His voice was calm, but it carried. The women froze, their bravado fading. Colton's hand found Simone's again. "Then keep my woman's name out of your mouth." The word, woman, sent a strange, warm jolt through Simone, enough to steady her shaking hands. Together they walked on, leaving the whispers behind. For once, it didn't feel like running away. It felt like choosing to walk forward. And as they passed the Ferris wheel, Simone's thoughts flickered back to that first night, the storm, the shelter, the way his hands had steadied her trembling. Back then they had been strangers clinging to each other. Now she realized they were something more, something she wanted to fight for. The next evening, Simone found herself seated at the Briggs family's long dining table. Colton had insisted she come, saying they needed to face his father head on. She wasn't sure whether she wanted to throw up or bolt for the door. Commissioner Briggs sat at the head of the table, his face as carved, and unreadable as the portraits of ancestors lining the walls. "You've made quite the stir in town, Simone," he said, folding his hands. "I hope you understand the position you've put my son in." Simone's palms were slick, but she lifted her chin. "With respect, sir, I didn't ask for the tornado. I didn't ask for your son's help. And I didn't ask to be threatened or lied about." Colton's father's eyes narrowed. "You think this family name is yours to use? To drag through the mud?" Colton's chair scraped against the floor as he stood. "Enough," he said, voice sharp. "You don't get to talk to her like that, not while I'm standing here." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, his father pushed back from the table, his mouth tight. "If you go through with this, you do it without this family's backing, without mine." Colton nodded once. "Then so be it." Simone's breath caught. This was the choice he'd warned her might come, the line drawn, and he'd just chosen her side. After dinner, Colton walked Simone out to her truck. The night air was cool, the stars sharp above them. "You didn't have to do that," Simone said softly. "You didn't have to choose me over them." He stepped closer, cupping her face. "I didn't choose you over them. I chose us, and if they can't accept that, then they were never really on my side." Simone's throat felt too tight to speak. She pressed her forehead against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You're going to get tired of me leaning on you," she murmured, Colton tipped her chin up until she met his gaze. Not a chance. He kissed her then, under the wide Texas sky, slow and steady. And for the first time, Simone let herself imagine what a life with him could look like, baby and all. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. And she wanted it more than she had ever wanted anything. The sky above the Briggs ranch was dark and restless, mirroring the tension in Simone's body. She had barely made it back from a late visit to the feedlot when the first contractions hit, sharp, insistent, and entirely unignorable. "Colton," she gasped, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. Her breath was shallow, and the color drained from her face. He was instantly at her side, worry etched deep into the lines of his handsome face. "Hey, breathe with me." Deep, slow breaths. "You've got this," he said, his hand warm on her back. But even as he spoke, his eyes were wide with panic. It's so early," Simone cried, sweat prickling her hairline. Colton took her hand in his, holding it like a lifeline. "Doesn't matter. You're not doing this alone. We're doing it together." The drive to the hospital was tense. Simone gritted her teeth against each contraction, moaning softly with every bump on the rough ranch road. Colton's hand never left hers, squeezing gently, murmuring encouragements between clenched teeth. Every curve of the road, every shudder of the truck, seemed to carry them closer to the impossible, exhilarating, terrifying moment ahead. At the hospital, nurses whisked her to a delivery room. Colton followed closely, standing as a steady presence as she fought through each wave of pain. "Look at me, Simone. You're stronger than you know," he said, brushing damp hair from her forehead, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, because it was true. He made her believe in herself. Hours passed in a blur of effort and patience. The storm outside rumbled faintly, a reminder of the night they had first found each other in the eye of chaos. And then, with one final push, a cry filled the room. Piercing, perfect, alive. Colton's eyes glistened with unshed tears as a nurse placed the tiny wet bundle into Simone's arms. The baby's skin was warm, soft, and miraculous, and Simone's exhaustion melted into something new, pure, fierce love. He's perfect," Colton whispered, his lips brushing the top of her hair as he bent close. "Our boy." Simone rested her forehead against his chest, listening to the rapid thrum of his heart. "We did it," she said, voice trembling. "We made it through." Colton hugged her close, a protective, almost desperate embrace. "I'll never let anything happen to you, or him. Never." For a long while, the three of them simply held each other, the storm outside fading into a gentle rain. The world had shifted on its axis, and though danger and judgment still lurked, in the wings, here, in this small hospital room, they were invincible. Simone finally smiled through her tears. "Welcome to the world, little man. You're going to be loved more than you could ever imagine." And Colton, standing beside her, whispered, "By both of us. Forever." The hospital room was quiet now, except for the soft coos of the newborn in Simone's arms. Colton rested a protective hand on her shoulder, eyes never leaving their son. The world outside felt miles away. Until the door opened. Commissioner Briggs and his wife stepped in, faces taut with controlled emotion. Colton stiffened, his jaw tightening. He had known this visit was inevitable, but no amount of preparation made it easy. "Colton," his father said, voice low, careful. We heard." Colton's gaze flicked between his father and mother, then back to Simone, who cradled their baby protectively. "You heard we had a baby," he said evenly. "Yes. And I'm telling you right now, he is ours, and I will not let anyone undermine that." His father's mouth tightened, but he didn't step back. "I didn't expect this, not like this." Colton's hand brushed over Simone's as she held the baby. "It doesn't matter what you expected. I made my choice. I chose them. I chose her. And if you want to be part of his life, you'll do it on our terms." There was a tense pause, Then the commissioner exhaled slowly. I may not agree with every decision you make, Colton, but I won't interfere with your family. Simone looked at Colton, relief and pride washing over her. He kept his eyes on his father, unwavering. Thank you, he said quietly. That's all I needed to hear. His mother stepped closer, offering a hand toward the baby. He's beautiful. Her voice softened, and for the first time in weeks, Simone felt an inkling of warmth from the Briggs family. Colton relaxed fractionally, guiding the baby into his father's hands carefully. The commissioner's fingers were stiff but tender as he held the tiny form, and Colton nodded once, satisfied. Boundaries were respected, grudging understanding reached, not perfection, but progress. Later, as the family left, Colton returned to Simone's side. He kissed her temple gently. We did it, he murmured. We're carving our own way, just like we promised. Simone smiled, resting her head on his chest. And nothing will change that. Not storms, not whispers, not anyone. Colton's hand threaded into hers, their fingers laced like a vow. Outside, the world continued in its unpredictable chaos, but inside, the three of them, Simone, Colton, and their son, had found solid ground. The sun hung low over the Briggs ranch, painting the fields gold and amber. The air smelled of fresh hay, earth, and a hint of rain from the morning shower. Simone cradled their baby against her chest, his tiny fingers curling around hers while Colton guided their truck up the familiar dirt driveway. This feels right, Simone murmured, glancing at the wide expanse of the ranch that had been Colton's childhood home and would now be theirs too. Colton nodded, his hand brushing her hair back from her face. It does. This is ours. Nobody else decides how we live here or raise him. Inside the main house, they moved through the familiar rooms with new eyes. Each corner, each worn piece of furniture now held a quiet significance. Simone set the baby down on the couch for a moment, stroking his soft cheek as Colton unlatched the nursery door. They had spent months dreaming of this, making this space their own, filling it with warmth, laughter, and love instead of fear and judgment. And now, it was real. Later, Colton's father called with a tentative voice, checking in but leaving boundaries clearly defined. He hadn't fully softened, but he had taken the first step toward acceptance. Colton smiled faintly. Progress, he said, tucking the baby against his shoulder. We don't need perfect, we just need them out of our way. Simone laughed softly, the sound light and free. Out of our way, yes, but never out of reach completely. We'll find a way to coexist. Colton bent down, kissing her temple. Exactly. And nothing, no storm, no gossip, no family politics will shake us. We've already weathered worse. As evening fell, the three of them stepped outside. The ranch stretched wide under the pink and purple sky, the fields whispering in the breeze. Colton held Simone close, one arm around her shoulders, the other gently supporting their son. Simone rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time in a long time, Simone felt completely at home, not just in a place, but in a life she had chosen. With Colton by her side and their son in their arms, she finally understood what it meant to be rooted, to be safe, and to be loved fiercely. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch, Simone whispered to herself, smiling, "We made it. We really made it." The sun spilled over the small Texas town like honey, gilding the fairgrounds in a golden glow. Simone walked beside Colton, their baby secured snugly in a carrier against her chest. The same fair where whispers and judgment had once filled the air now seemed alive with laughter, music, and the smell of fresh pies and roasted corn. Colton's hand found hers as they moved past the livestock pens and midway booths. He glanced down at her, a slow, fond smile playing on his lips. "Remember the first time we came here?" he asked quietly, his eyes soft with memory. Simone chuckled, a light, warm sound. How could I forget? The whispers, the stares, and the way you defended me. He squeezed her hand. Guess some things never change. They paused at the Ferris wheel, its bright lights twinkling in the early evening. Simone glanced around, noticing familiar faces smiling at them, no judgment in their eyes. Some townspeople waved, a few calling out congratulations. It felt surreal, the same place that had once felt like a storm of gossip and scrutiny, now radiating acceptance and warmth. Their baby stirred against Simone's chest, cooing softly. Colton leaned down, brushing a gentle kiss against the top of Simone's head. We've come a long way, he whispered. And now he gets to grow up knowing love, not rumors. Simone rested her cheek against his shoulder, breathing in the moment. The warmth of the sun, the gentle tug of their baby's tiny fingers, the steady, protective presence of the man who had once been a stranger in a storm and was now the center of her world. For the first time in a long time, she felt completely free. Free from fear, free from doubt, free to love and be loved without hesitation. As the Ferris wheel turned, casting its soft, colorful glow across the fairgrounds, Simone smiled down at her son and whispered, Welcome to your world, little one. It's full of storms, sure, but also sunshine, love, and the people who will always stand by you. Colton wrapped his arms around both of them, and together they watched the sun dip below the horizon. The storms of the past had passed, leaving behind something stronger, brighter, and enduring, a family, whole and unshakable. And for Simone, in that quiet, golden moment, the future felt wide open, safe, and endlessly promising. Thank you so much for listening to Shelter in the Storm. This story is about more than a tornado, more than romance. It's about finding safety, love, and the courage to stand up for what matters, even when the world feels like it's spinning out of control. We hope this story gave you a chance to pause, breathe, and escape for a little while in the middle of your busy day, and maybe even reminded you that no matter the storm, there's always calm on the other side. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt, slow-burn romances just like this one. Your support helps bring more stories like Colton and Simone's to life. Thank you for spending time with us today. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and keep believing in love.